The sun was setting over the wide Texas plains, bleeding gold and crimson across the horizon like a dying fire. The wind moved slow, whispering through the tall grass, and the world seemed caught between day and night, that fragile, silent moment before darkness truly arrived. Rancher Cole Harlow rode alone through the fading light, his horse's hooves beating a steady rhythm on the dry earth. He was a man used to silence, used to the weight of solitude that came with working a ranch miles away from town. The land stretched endlessly around him, fences half broken, cattle grazing in the distance, the sky so big it made a man feel small. Cole adjusted his hat against the low sun and let out a sigh that carried weeks of exhaustion. He'd been mending fences since dawn, chasing strays, fixing what the storm 2 nights ago had torn apart. His life was built on work, honest, lonely, endless work. As he neared the riverbed, a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a coyote slipping through the brush, but as his horse drew closer, he realized it was something else, someone. A figure lying near the edge of the shallow water, half hidden by the reeds. Cole slowed his horse, his hand instinctively brushing against the worn leather of his holster. The figure didn't move. Cautiously, he dismounted and stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. It was a woman. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt and blood. One arm was twisted awkwardly beneath her, and the other reached weakly toward him as if she had been trying to crawl away. Her hair, tangled and dark, glistened faintly in the fading light. Cole knelt beside her, scanning for signs of life. "Ma'am?" he asked quietly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. For a second, she seemed to look straight through him, as if she wasn't seeing the man before her but something far away. Then, in a trembling, broken whisper, she said the words that would echo in his mind for nights to come. "Don't." "Stop!" Cole froze, uncertain. Her voice was faint, almost carried away by the wind. He leaned closer. "Don't stop what?" he asked, but her eyes rolled back and she went limp. His pulse quickened. She was still breathing, barely. He looked around. The empty plain stretched on forever. No smoke, no sign of another soul. He had to get help. He pressed his hand gently against her shoulder. "Hold on, I'll bring help," he said, standing to mount his horse. But when he turned back one last time, the setting sun dipped behind the ridge and the shadows swallowed her completely. He spurred his horse toward town, heart pounding, dust rising behind him like smoke. The ride back felt longer than it should have, the weight of her whisper clinging to his mind. "Don't stop." It hadn't sounded like fear. It sounded like a plea. But for what? By the time he reached the main road, night had fallen. The sheriff's office was dark and the streets nearly empty. He called out for help, but the only response was the wind creaking a half-broken sign. He turned back immediately, determined to find her again. But when he returned to the riverbed, guided by moonlight and instinct, she was gone. The ground where she had lain was disturbed, faint footprints, some small, others larger, as if someone had dragged her away. The water shimmered, reflecting the stars, hiding its secrets. Cole dismounted slowly, scanning the darkness. "Ma'am?" he called out. His voice echoed unanswered. Only the night and the river replied. He knelt again, tracing the faint bloodstains on the rock. The torn scrap of fabric caught on a thorn. The air felt colder suddenly, heavier, like the land itself was holding its breath. And for the first time in years, Rancher Cole Harlow felt something more than loneliness, a stirring deep inside, a sense that he had just stepped into a story much larger than himself. He didn't yet know her name. He didn't know what she was running from, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever "don't stop" had meant, it wasn't over. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, a thin mist curling low over the prairie. The usual sounds of the ranch, cattle stirring, wind brushing against the corral fence, seemed distant, muted, as if the world itself was holding back a secret. Cole Harlow hadn't slept much. He'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, the memory of that woman's pale face and trembling voice echoing in his mind. Don't stop. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed her, that maybe, if he'd stayed just a moment longer, he could have saved her. As he poured his morning coffee, he heard the distant thunder of hooves. He stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath his boots. Through the mist, a rider approached, broad-shouldered, wearing a dust-stained coat and a star pinned to his chest. It was Sheriff Amos McCready, a man Cole had known since boyhood, though they'd grown apart over the years. McCready dismounted, his expression grim. "Morning, Cole," he greeted, though there was little warmth in his voice. "Morning, Sheriff," Cole replied cautiously. "You're out early." McCready nodded, his hand resting near his revolver. "Got some trouble down south of here? Stagecoach out of Abilene was hit last night. 5 passengers, 2 dead, others missing." He paused, letting the words hang in the cool air. One of them was a woman. "Name's Evelyn Sinclair." Cole felt his stomach twist. The name meant little to him, but the memory of the woman's face, or the fear, the desperation, flared in his mind. "You think she's still alive?" The sheriff exhaled through his nose. "Hard to say. We found signs near the old trade road, tracks, blood, torn fabric. Looks like she might have tried to run before they took her." He gave Cole a sharp look. "You seen anything out there last night?" Cole hesitated. "Maybe." McCready's eyes narrowed. "Maybe. I found someone," Cole admitted slowly. "Down by the riverbed. She was hurt bad. I tried to ride for help, but when I came back, she was gone." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "And you didn't come to town right away?" "I did," Cole said defensively. "You weren't there." "Whole place was dark," McCready grunted. "You should have come to my house. Could be she's still out there or worse." He studied Cole for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Then he sighed. "Listen, Cole, I know you mean well, but this ain't your fight. Sinclair's got men coming in from Fort Worth. Bounty hunters, trackers, folks who don't ask questions. Best thing you can do is stay clear." Cole crossed his arms, gaze hardening. "If she's out there, alone and hurt, I can't just sit here." "That woman's father is the richest cattle baron in 3 counties, McCready said flatly. "Men who cross him tend to disappear. You want to risk your ranch for someone you don't even know?" Cole's silence was answer enough. The sheriff sighed again, rubbing his forehead. "You've always had a way of getting yourself into trouble, Cole. Just don't do anything stupid." He mounted his horse, turning back down the dusty road. "If you find something, you come straight to me. Understand?" Cole nodded, though his thoughts were already far from the ranch. As the sheriff rode off, Cole glanced toward the horizon, toward the direction of the river. The mist was lifting now, revealing the faint outline of the canyons beyond. Somewhere out there, he felt sure, that woman was still alive. And if she was in danger. He saddled his horse again, ignoring the nagging voice of reason in his mind. The whisper came back to him, soft as wind through the grass. "Don't stop." This time he wouldn't. He turned the horse toward the south and rode out. The morning sun breaking through the clouds behind him, a lone figure heading into the unknown, with only a voice in his memory and a promise he didn't fully understand guiding him forward. The sun had climbed high, burning away the morning mist and painting the land in sharp, unforgiving light. Dust shimmered in the heat as Cole Harlow rode south toward the canyons, following the old trade route that cut through the desert like a scar. The sheriff's warning still echoed in his head, but he couldn't ignore what he'd seen, or the whisper that still haunted his thoughts. He reined in his horse at the riverbed, the same place where he'd found the wounded woman the night before. The water was lower now, reflecting a thin strip of sky. He dismounted slowly, scanning the ground. At first, all he saw were hoof prints, dozens of them, some old, some fresh, and broken reeds crushed underfoot. But then, half buried in the sand, he noticed something faint, a set of small footprints leading away from the river. He crouched down, tracing the outline with his fingers. They were light, too small to belong to a man. Beside them, another trail cut deeper into the dirt. Heavy boots, 2, maybe 3 men. The marks told a story clearer than words. She'd tried to escape, and someone had dragged her back. Cole's jaw tightened. He rose, following the tracks along the water's edge. They wound south, toward a jagged wall of red rock, the entrance to Devil's Hollow, an abandoned mining canyon locals swore was cursed. The place had been empty for years, but it made perfect sense for men who didn't want to be found. As Cole entered the canyon, the air grew cooler. The walls rose steeply on both sides, trapping the sound of his horse's hooves so that every step echoed back like a ghost following behind him. Here and there, old mine shafts gaped open, dark mouths in the stone. A buzzard circled overhead. He spotted the first real sign of her near a bend in the path, a torn piece of fabric caught on a thorn bush. He recognized it immediately, the same pale color as the dress she had been wearing. His pulse quickened. She had come this way, but he wasn't alone. A faint metallic click broke the stillness, and Cole froze. The sound was unmistakable, the cold pull of a rifle's hammer being cocked. "Don't move, rancher!" a voice called out from behind a boulder. "Ain't wise to wander in here without an invitation." Cole slowly raised his hands, turning just enough to see the man who'd spoken. The figure stepped into view, lean, rough-faced, with a scar running across his chin. His gun was steady, eyes sharp with recognition. "Jeb Larkin," Cole muttered. The name tasted bitter. Jeb had once worked for him, years ago, before greed and drink had turned him mean. "Well, I'll be damned," Jeb said with a crooked grin. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Harlow. Thought you'd given up playing hero." "I'm not here to play anything," Cole replied evenly. "I'm looking for someone." "Yeah," Jeb chuckled. "So's everyone else." He took a step closer, his gun still trained on Cole. "Word is you found her once already. Pretty little thing, ain't she?" Cole's stomach turned. "Where is she?" Jeb smirked, lowering the rifle just slightly. "Now that depends. Maybe she's here. Maybe she's already halfway to Mexico. But if you're smart, you'll turn that horse around and forget she ever existed." The canyon wind picked up, carrying a faint sound. A woman's cry, muffled, distant, echoing through the rocks. Cole's heart slammed in his chest. He knew that voice. Jeb's grin widened when he saw the change in Cole's face. "Careful, Harlow. That's a sound that'll get you killed." Cole's hand inched toward his revolver. "Then I guess I'll take my chances." For a tense second, neither man moved. The air crackled between them like dry lightning. Then Cole spun, his revolver flashing from its holster. A single shot rang out, ricocheting off the canyon wall. Jeb ducked behind a rock, cursing. By the time he fired back, Cole had already mounted his horse and disappeared deeper into the canyon, following the sound of the woman's voice and the trail that fate had carved into the dust. Didn't know what waited ahead, and only that he wasn't turning back. Not now. Not after hearing her cry again. The whisper from that night returned in his mind, more urgent than ever. "Don't stop." And this time, he wouldn't. The canyon walls seemed to close in the deeper Cole Harlow rode into Devil's Hollow. The air was thick with dust and the bitter scent of iron from the old mines. His horse's breath came in short bursts, hooves striking sparks from the rocks. Somewhere ahead, he could hear faint voices, men laughing, the low crackle of a campfire. He slowed his pace and dismounted, tying his horse behind a ridge. From there, he crept forward, boots soundless on the dusty ground. The camp came into view. 3 men sat near the fire, rifles resting against boulders, their laughter cruel and easy. A 4th figure was tied near a fallen log, a woman, her hair matted and her face half hidden by dirt and shadow. Cole's chest tightened. Even in the dim light, he recognized her. Evelyn Sinclair. Her wrists were bound, and a bruise darkened one side of her face. Yet her eyes were open, sharp with awareness. She wasn't crying. She was watching, waiting, like someone counting her captor's breaths. Then Cole's gaze shifted to the man tending the fire. Jeb Larkin, the outlaw who had once worked his cattle. Jeb looked different now, thinner, harder, his face carved by bitterness. When Cole had last seen him, Jeb was a man beaten down by debt. Now he looked like someone who'd made a deal with the devil and was proud of it. Cole stepped from the shadows, gun drawn. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you, Jeb." The laughter stopped. Every man's hand went to his weapon. Jeb turned slowly, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Well, I'll be," he said, grinning. "Didn't think you had the guts to follow me in here, Harlow." "Let her go," Cole ordered. Jeb tilted his head, amused. "Can't do that, not yet. See, this lady's worth more alive than dead. Her daddy's got pockets deeper than the canyon. And after what that old bastard did to me, I figure he owes me a payday." Cole's jaw tightened. "You think Sinclair's gonna pay ransom to the man who took his daughter?" Jeb chuckled. "He don't need to know it was me. I've got friends who'll handle the talking. All I need is time." Cole took a step closer, the barrel of his revolver steady. "You won't get it," the outlaw's rifles clicked. The air turned razor-sharp. Evelyn's eyes darted between them, wide but defiant. Then Jeb raised a hand, halting his men. "Hold on," he said, grinning again. "No need for blood. Yet. Tell you what, Cole, you want the girl? We can strike a bargain." Cole's voice was cold. "I don't make deals with snakes." "Shame," Jeb replied. "Because the alternative ends with you face down in the dust." He took a slow step forward, lowering his gun slightly, as if to speak man to man. "You see, I remember the day your ranch went under. Remember who bought up your cattle cheap? Sinclair's men. Maybe we're not so different, you and me. He ruined both our lives. You just don't have the guts to admit it." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You blame him for your choices." "That's the difference." For a heartbeat, the canyon was silent except for the fire's crackle. Then Jeb spat into the dust. "Suit yourself." He turned sharply toward Evelyn. "Guess I'll have to raise the price. Maybe the old man will pay double once he knows what I plan to do if he doesn't." Evelyn flinched but didn't cry out. Her gaze found Cole's in the firelight, a flicker of recognition, trust, and something deeper. Her lips parted, barely moving, and she whispered again, "Don't stop." This time Cole understood. In one swift motion, he dove sideways, rolling behind a boulder as gunfire erupted. The night filled with sparks and echoes, bullets slamming into rock, shouts of men scattering. Cole returned fire, each shot deliberate, forcing Jeb's men back into cover. Amid the chaos, he moved toward Evelyn, cutting the rope around her wrists with his knife. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded weakly, clutching his arm. "Then let's move." Together, they vanished into the maze of shadows. Leaving Jeb cursing behind them, the echo of gunfire faded into the distance as Cole led her toward safety. The canyon wind moaned low, like the earth itself warning him. This wasn't over. Jeb Larkin would come for them, but for now, Cole had her, and for the first time since that night by the river, he felt that maybe he hadn't misunderstood her words after all. Don't stop, not this time. The moon hung low and pale over Devil's Hollow, throwing long silver shadows across the canyon floor. The sound of gunfire still echoed faintly in the distance, fading into the whisper of wind through the rocks. Cole Harlow led Evelyn Sinclair through the narrow passages, his hand gripping hers firmly. She stumbled several times, weak from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. Every step was a struggle, yet her eyes burned with determination. Behind them, faint shouts echoed. Jeb Larkin and his men were still searching, their lanterns flickering like fireflies in the dark. Cole guided Evelyn toward a hidden trail he remembered from years ago, one that wound behind the ridge and led to the abandoned mining tunnels. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to lose them. "Keep low," he whispered. "We'll rest once we're clear." Evelyn nodded silently, clutching the torn remains of her dress close against the cold. Her face was pale beneath the moonlight, streaked with dirt and dried blood, but her spirit had not broken. They slipped into the mouth of an old tunnel, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air inside was damp and heavy, smelling of rust and forgotten years. Cole struck a match, the tiny flame lighting the way ahead. The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk single file, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone. After several minutes, they reached a wider chamber where a small stream trickled through the rock. Cole knelt beside it, filling his hands with water and offering it to her. Evelyn drank greedily, then coughed, trembling as she wiped her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cole studied her face in the dim light. Beneath the dirt and fear, he saw strength and something else he couldn't name. "You shouldn't talk," he said gently. You've been through enough, but she shook her head. You don't understand. They weren't supposed to find me. What do you mean? I wasn't kidnapped, she said quietly, staring at the dark water. I ran, Cole frowned. Ran from who? Her eyes lifted to his, filled with pain. My father. The words hung between them, sharp as the chill in the cave. Cole had heard rumors about Henry Sinclair, the cattle baron who ruled half the county with money and fear. A man who treated his empire like a kingdom, and his daughter like property. I tried to leave, Evelyn continued. I wanted to go north, start over. But his men found out. They were supposed to bring me back, not sell me. Her voice broke, the memory choking her. Then Jeb came. He told them he could make more money if he handled it himself. Cole's jaw clenched. And he would have if I hadn't come along. Evelyn met his gaze, eyes glistening. You shouldn't have risked your life for me. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Wasn't much of a life to risk. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence of the tunnel wrapped around them, broken only by the distant drip of water. Cole's match burned low, the flame flickering weakly. Then Evelyn shivered, her body trembling from cold and shock. Cole took off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. You'll freeze without it, she whispered. I've been colder, he replied softly. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, a storm brewing on the plains. The wind howled through the canyon like a ghostly warning. Cole looked toward the entrance of the tunnel, every instinct on edge. He knew Jeb wouldn't give up. Men like him never did. We'll move before dawn, he said, loading his revolver. He'll come looking, and I want to be gone when he does. Evelyn's eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. Cole, she murmured, her voice slurred with fatigue. If I don't wake up, don't stop. He turned to her sharply, the words hitting him like a memory reborn. Her whisper, the same one he'd heard by the river. This time, he understood completely. She wasn't asking him to run. She was asking him not to give up. Cole sat beside her as she drifted into uneasy sleep, keeping his revolver ready, his eyes fixed on the tunnel mouth. The storm outside rumbled closer, the rain beginning to fall. Somewhere out in that darkness, Jeb Larkin was hunting. But so long as Cole Harlow drew breath, he wasn't going to let that outlaw, or anyone else, touch her again. For the first time in years, he had a reason to fight. And he wasn't about to stop. The storm raged through the night, thunder rolling across the canyon like cannon fire. Inside the narrow safety of the old mine tunnel, Cole Harlow sat with his back against the stone wall, his revolver resting across his knee. Rainwater dripped from the rocks above, echoing in the dark chamber. Beside him, Evelyn Sinclair lay wrapped in his coat, her breathing shallow but steady. Cole couldn't sleep. His mind replayed everything, the gunfight, her whispered plea, the truth she'd revealed about her father. He felt caught in something bigger than he could control. What had started as a rescue was becoming something deeper, something dangerous to his heart. When Evelyn stirred, he glanced down. Her face was pale, the faint light from his lantern softening the bruises on her skin. She tried to sit up but winced from pain. Easy, Cole said, moving closer. You took a beating. Best not to push yourself. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. You could have left me. Could have, he replied, handing her a small piece of dried bread from his saddlebag. Didn't. A weak smile flickered on her lips. Why? Cole hesitated. The truth wasn't something he liked admitting, even to himself. Because I've seen what men like Jeb become. And I've seen what happens when good folks turn away. He paused, his gaze fixed on the tunnel's dark opening. I ain't running from this. For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. The storm outside howled, wind shrieking through cracks in the rock. Finally, she whispered, Thank you for not stopping. Those words, don't stop, echoed again in his chest, but this time they carried a warmth that unsettled him. He wasn't sure what she meant, or if she even knew. Hours passed. The rain slowed to a drizzle, but the air remained heavy. Cole added more wood to the small fire he'd built, the faint glow dancing across the stone walls. Evelyn watched him quietly. You're not like the others, she said softly. Others? "The men my father trusted," she explained. "They smile, shake hands, but every one of them wants something. Land, money, favor. You—" Her eyes softened. "You want nothing." Cole met her gaze for a moment before looking away. "Ain't true. I want peace. Haven't had much of it in years." She studied him. "And do you think you'll find it?" He gave a dry chuckle. "Not while I'm sitting in a mine shaft with a wanted man looking to put a bullet in me." Evelyn laughed faintly, but it faded quickly into a cough. Cole was at her side in an instant, helping her sit up, his hand resting on her back. Her skin was hot. Too hot. "Fever. Damn," he muttered, soaking his handkerchief in the stream and pressing it to her forehead. "You've got a fever. You need a doctor." Her fingers clutched his wrist suddenly, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, don't go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please don't stop." For a second, the meaning hit him wrong. His heart pounded as her eyes fluttered open, wide and frightened. He thought she meant something else. That she didn't want him to move away. That she needed more than comfort. "Evelyn," he began softly, unsure. But her words came out again, barely a breath. "If I sleep, I might not wake up." Realization struck him like a blade. She wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid of dying. Cole's chest tightened. He took her hand in both of his and said firmly, "You're not dying tonight." "Not while I'm here." Her grip loosened, and she managed a faint smile. "You promise?" "I promise." She finally drifted into sleep, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Cole sat still, watching the fire burn low. Outside, dawn began to touch the sky, pale light creeping through the cracks of the tunnel. But even as the world slowly brightened, a shadow grew in his thoughts. Because he knew that once they left this cave, the real danger would begin, not just from Jeb Larkin, but from the lies, power, and revenge that followed the Sinclair name. He looked down at Evelyn, her face peaceful in the dim light. Somewhere deep inside, something stirred, something he'd long buried beneath dust and duty. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was enough to make him stay, enough to make him keep his promise, enough to make him never stop. The dawn broke sharp and golden over the plains, chasing away the storm clouds that had haunted the night. Cole Harlow and Evelyn Sinclair rode in silence through the open range, their horses kicking up trails of dust. The cool morning wind brushed against their faces, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and mesquite. Evelyn was weak, but awake, her fever broken. Wrapped in Cole's coat, she sat tall in the saddle, though her eyes revealed exhaustion. Cole rode beside her, scanning the horizon with wary eyes. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant dust plume a threat. They reached Cole's ranch by midday, a modest spread of weathered fences and hand-built corrals surrounded by rolling grass. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. The cattle grazed lazily in the distance, but something about the stillness made Cole uneasy. He helped Evelyn down from her horse, and she nearly collapsed. "Easy," he said, catching her by the waist. She steadied herself and gave him a faint, grateful smile. "You weren't supposed to risk all this," she murmured. "I didn't plan to," Cole replied dryly. "But plans change." He guided her inside his cabin, a simple wooden structure with creaking floors and a warm hearth. It had the smell of tobacco, leather, and solitude. Evelyn sat near the fire as Cole fetched water from the basin. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. Cole nodded. "Ain't much company in these parts. Just me, the land, and a few stubborn cows." She smiled weakly. "Sounds peaceful." "Sometimes," he said, but his tone carried weight, the kind of peace that comes from years of silence and loss. Before he could say more, the sound of hooves thundered outside. Cole's hand went instinctively to his revolver. Through the window, he saw a group of riders approaching, 6, maybe 7, dust rising behind them. At the front rode a tall man in a black coat, silver buttons shining in the sunlight. "Stay here," Cole said firmly, stepping to the door. The riders stopped just beyond the fence line. The man in black dismounted first, removing his hat to reveal a stern, proud face. Even before he spoke, Cole knew who he was. Henry Sinclair. "Mr. Harlow," the cattle baron said coolly, his voice sharp and practiced. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Your daughter came here on her own. She's hurt, but she's safe." Sinclair's gaze hardened. "Safe?" He took a step closer, his boots crunching in the dirt. "You call hiding my daughter in a fugitive's cabin safe?" Cole didn't flinch. "You call sending men after her love?" The other riders shifted uneasily. The tension in the air was thick, the kind that precedes violence. Inside the cabin, Evelyn pushed herself to the window. "Father, stop!" she called out, her voice trembling. Sinclair's expression flickered. Relief, then anger. "Evelyn, come here this instant!" She stepped out slowly, her figure framed by the doorway. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," she said, her voice weak but steady. "You can't control me, not with fear, not with money." Her father's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're saying. That man has turned you against your own blood." Cole stepped beside her. "She doesn't need me to tell her what's right. She already knows." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then one of Sinclair's hired guns made a move. Too quick, too loud. A single gunshot cracked the silence. The bullet missed its mark, but hit one of Sinclair's men in the arm. Panic erupted. Horses reared, men shouted, and the air filled with smoke and gunfire. Cole shoved Evelyn behind him, firing back with deadly precision. Dust flew up around the ranch house as the chaos raged. When the smoke cleared, 2 men lay wounded. The others began to retreat, dragging their fallen with them. Henry Sinclair stood frozen, staring at his daughter, the gun in his hand trembling. "Enough!" Evelyn cried out, stepping forward. "It's over, Father. I won't go back." Sinclair's face crumpled, the weight of years of pride and anger breaking in a single moment. He dropped his revolver into the dirt. "So be it," he whispered, turning away. His men followed, disappearing into the horizon. The ranch was silent again, save for the crackling fire inside. Cole turned to Evelyn, her hands shaking, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered. "I didn't want anyone hurt." Cole holstered his gun, his expression somber. "You can't always stop what others start." He looked at the horizon where Sinclair had vanished. He knew it wasn't truly over. Not yet. Because out there, Jeb Larkin was still alive. And vengeance was a fire that never burned out quietly. And the next time he came, there would be more than blood on the ranch. There would be reckoning. The night that followed the gunfight was restless. The ranch lay in uneasy silence, broken fences and trampled earth marking the scars of violence. The smell of gunpowder still clung to the wind. Inside the cabin, Evelyn Sinclair sat near the window, staring into the darkness. Her hands trembled as she held a mug of untouched coffee. Every time she blinked, she saw flashes of what had happened. The gunfire, the blood, her father's face twisted in pain and pride. Cole Harlow moved quietly around the room, checking his rifle, his shoulders tense. He hadn't said much since the shooting. The burden of what had happened, of what could still come, weighed on him like lead. "Do you think he'll come back?" Evelyn asked softly. Cole didn't look up from his rifle. "Your father? No, he's done fighting." She hesitated. "I wasn't talking about him." Cole paused. He knew exactly who she meant. Jeb Larkin, the outlaw who had started all this, who had nearly sold her for ransom and tried to kill them both. A man who had once been his friend. Back when the world seemed simpler. "He'll come," Cole said finally. "Men like Jeb don't know how to let go." As if summoned by those words, a distant sound rose in the wind. The crack of gunfire, faint but unmistakable. Cole's head snapped up. Outside, a faint orange glow flickered against the black sky. Smoke. The barn, he muttered, rushing to the door. He flung it open and froze. Flames were already licking the edges of the roof. Evelyn gasped. Cole! Stay! Inside! He shouted, grabbing his hat and running into the storm of heat and smoke. But Evelyn didn't listen. She followed him out into the night, the firelight painting her face in gold and red. Jeb Larkin stood in the middle of the yard, a rifle in one hand, his mouth twisted in a wild grin. The fire behind him made his shadow loom monstrous against the barn wall. "Evening, Harlow," he called out. "You should have stayed out of this. Could have lived quiet. But no, you had to play the hero." Cole stepped forward, revolver drawn. "Drop it, Jeb. It's over." Jeb laughed, a sound filled with madness and hate. "Over? You think I came for you?" His eyes darted toward Evelyn. "I came for what's mine. She cost me my payday, my freedom, my men. I figure I'll take something back before I'm done." Evelyn stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "You'll take nothing, Jeb." For a second their gazes locked, the outlaw and the woman he'd once meant to sell. Then Jeb raised his rifle. The sound of the shot shattered the night. Cole moved faster than thought, tackling Evelyn to the ground. The bullet missed her by inches. He rolled to his feet and fired back. 1, 2, 3 shots. Jeb stumbled, his rifle slipping from his hand as one bullet struck his shoulder. But the outlaw wasn't done. With a snarl, he lunged for a fallen pistol in the dirt. Before Cole could stop him, Evelyn snatched up Jeb's dropped rifle, hands trembling but eyes clear. "Don't," she warned. Jeb froze, blood dripping from his sleeve. "You won't shoot me," he spat. "You ain't got it in you." Her voice broke, but her aim didn't. "You're wrong." The rifle cracked. Jeb fell backward, the firelight flickering across his lifeless face. The world fell silent again, except for the burning barn collapsing in a storm of sparks. Cole rushed to Evelyn's side, gently lowering the rifle from her shaking hands. "It's over," he whispered. "You did what you had to." Tears welled in her eyes, not from guilt, but from release. "I didn't want it to end like this." Cole looked toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break through the smoke. "Things don't end clean out here," he said quietly, "but they can start new." The fire died slowly, the ashes glowing like dying stars. As the sun rose over the plains, its light fell across the two of them, bruised, weary, but alive. Evelyn turned to him, her voice soft as the wind. "That night by the river, when I said don't stop, I wasn't asking you to run." Cole met her gaze, the corners of his mouth lifting in the faintest smile. "I know." She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I meant, don't stop being the man who tries, the man who fights for what's right." Cole looked out over the blackened ranch, the smoke rising into the dawn. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace, fragile, hard-won, but real. He reached for her hand. "Then I won't," he said simply. The sun climbed higher, washing the land in light and warmth. And for Cole Harlow and Evelyn Sinclair, it wasn't just a new day. It was a beginning.